This is Rhonda Brooks of Farm Journal Media. I'm here in Livingston County, Missouri today, and I'm with Ron and Ben Beetsma. And we're talking about grain sorghum, and I know here lately it's been on people's radar. It's kind of got a profitable thing going for it right now. Tell me a little bit about why you've been growing it since the 70s.
Mainly because of the type of soils that we have in our bottoms. Heavy clays, we didn't have luck planting corn, so we've gone to milo, and it's been yields have been really good, and our input costs are somewhat less than corn, so it's we've gotten along real well with milo.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about that. Ben, you were talking a little bit earlier about just the input costs. Break those out for me a little bit about why that is such a benefit.
Well, as far as like the seed cost, you're looking at about $20 an acre for milo, whereas corn is upwards of $100 an acre. So right there, you're starting off with quite a bit of savings right there, and then you also have the fertilizer application. We don't use quite as much nitrogen in the growing of the crop, so whereas typically in corn we're 180 pounds or so, where in milo we're only 120 to 130 roughly. So you're saving costs there. So it's a cost savings, not on top of having the premium at the end of the year selling the milo.
And then you have a day, the last few days, where it's a blast furnace out there. Poor old corn is all curled up and firing at the bottom, and milo is just kind of laying back, liking this weather.
Yeah, it looked pretty good out there. Much better than what I would have anticipated. How dry it's been.
Yes.
One of the things that you were talking about too, Ron, I had asked you just for some kind of suggestions or recommendations for growers maybe who haven't planted it. And one of the things you mentioned to me was just like seeding rates. Tell me a little bit about that.
Okay, on seeding rates, I think a lot of people that first try it tend to get it too thick. We try to keep down around 5 to 6 pounds per acre. That would relate back to roughly, we start out about 90,000 seeds per acre, and hope to end up with maybe, milo you have a kind of a high mortality rate. You're lucky to get 70% stand usually out of 90,000. So if you end up with a 60-70,000 stand, that's good.
That's good. And tell me a little bit about why that's good.
Well, the milo crop is it'll tiller out. Like if you end up with one per foot, that plant that by itself there will probably put out 6 to 7 tillers. Each of those tillers will put a head out just as big as the main stalk. So it will compensate a lot for thin stands.
Kind of like soybeans in some regards, would you say?
Correct, yes.
Yeah. What else as far as from a nutrient standpoint, what does milo need?
Well, like I said, we reduce the nitrogen intake. We'll put on our phosphate at planting, and then we like to use, and we use this in corn also, we'll put on 15 to 20 pounds of sulfur per acre.
That's right. What were you telling me as far as your nitrogen to sulfur, that ratio you'd mentioned?
Well, yeah, we use like a 32% nitrogen, but we replace 3% of it with sulfur, so we end up with a 29.03, and then that will give us roughly 15 to 18 pounds per acre of sulfur.
Mm-hmm. And you were telling me as far as equipment, use the same. Go ahead, Ben.
As far as planting, we use a 30-inch row planter, and we put half our nitrogen on with it and with the planter, and then we come back in and side dress, anywhere from knee high to basically around knee high. And then we also do something a lot of people don't do these days anymore, which is row crop cultivation to it, depending on if there's weed issues, or if we want to, in dry spells like this, sometimes it doesn't hurt to kind of stir up the dirt and get some dirt up against the plant and kind of invigorate the roots. And then when it comes to harvesting, we use rotary combines, and we use row crop heads on the front of those, which a lot of guys just use grain platforms, which we've seen an increase in yield by using the row crop heads, because you're not losing the heads over the front of the cutter bar on the combine. And then as far as the rotary combine as opposed to a cylinder combine. The rotary action actually helps separate the milo from the head better than what the cylinder would.
All right. And as far as harvest, you were telling me as far as percent moisture, kind of when you start in on harvest?
Well, a lot of time we won't start any wetter than 20% moisture and sometimes the plant's still alive and green, and that gives you a problem because the stalk tends to have a lot of juice in it. So if you harvest a lot of stalk, then you get more juice and moisture will go up. But anyway, we'll start at 20%. We run almost all our milo through a dryer. If it does get down to 14%, where that's number 2 milo, then we'll put it right in the bin. But the problem with that is a lot of times just overnight, milo sometimes will pick up 3 percentage points overnight. So you've got to be real careful. You end up at in the evening at 14% thinking you're going to start tomorrow at 14%, and that's not the case.
It'll be back up to that 17 or 18, whatever.
You definitely have to pay a lot more. My uncle and I are the ones that operate the combines. You have to pay a lot more attention than you do like in soy. I mean, there's a lot more adjustments through the day with the combine when you're harvesting milo as opposed to corn and soybeans.
I thought it was interesting what you guys said as far as how fast you're running. Tell me a little bit about that.
Typically we run, these are 8-row heads, and on my row crop heads on our combines, typically we'll run 4 to 5 miles an hour. 5 would be the very top, and that would be if it was dry milo and the plants were dead. And as compared to corn, we run a 12-row head about 6 mile an hour. So you can see that you don't want to jam it through the combine. You want to let it have time to thresh and separate, and it makes your quality that much better.
All right. Well, Ron and Ben, I really appreciate you letting me come in here and talk to you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.